human sources, I read a lot. I kept running into this thing called a blood moon. And if anybody knows what a blood moon is, I would appreciate what your take on it is. But I Googled it. And what it says in what Google's website said was that the fourth total lunar eclipse of a year is a blood moon. And we've had several of those over the last few decades, and they've always been followed by a major shift. Well, the next blood moon is September, what did I say, 29th?
Wasn't it before the energy shift?
No, it's after.
28th.
28th, September 28th. So just be aware. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but things are happening, and I know about the chemtrails. And I was on the boardwalk on July 15th, so I can tell you what happened over there. Yeah, it was overcast. It was terrible, and we had a few things go on there that were kind of weird, but it was an unusual day. And traffic was horrible.
This was on Wednesday.
Traffic was horrible on the 5 freeway, it was horrible on the 110 freeway, and it was horrible on the 10. Just horrible.
Thank you, Therese. Thank you very much. Okay, we have some new people here, I see. Let's see, Mr. Atkins, you want to share?
I'm Greg from Hollywood. One of the links I saw recently was the bad guys, thinking what whoever's doing this to us is coming out with chemicals that are invisible and more toxic. So that's something to think about.
Hello, welcome.
Yeah, I just thought I'd have a listen and interview.
Well, I'm glad you did. Welcome. You'll learn a lot today.
Okay,
Good.
Hello everyone, William.
William, yes, William. Hi.
Okay, just like everyone, most of us, wake up in the morning, it's overcast, and it's just like a feeling of like you're not even wanting to get up. It's like, okay, so it's like you said, it's like you're kind of like lazy. Correct. For me, I need the sun. Whenever the sun is up, I get up. So without the sun, I'm like bummed out.
Yeah.
So within that frame, I need the sun, just like everybody else. Without the sun, I'm sorry. Wow. Okay. Every day for me is like very difficult. The chemtrails, Fukushima, radiation, everything, you know, it makes your body feel mortal. And you know, it's like you can't even think sometimes. It's like you have a brain fog. You know, it's winter time.
Yes.
So, I don't know what the next thing would be. That's what we're all here to find out what's the next step.
That's what you said, and that's good. That's why we're here. This is the only group I know in Los Angeles that's willing to talk about topics that are untalkable. And the fact that we can come here and share these as laymen and laywomen, and be just, you know, we're not medical doctors, we're people who try to do research on our own, but we have our own experiences and we have to confirm that something is not right. And I think the fact that we can come here is a way of supporting the fact that we need to do something for ourselves and for the world. So we have a gentleman here. Hello.
Hi, my name's Al. I just use you for
Speak up.
Thank you.
So anyway, I'm very interested in this topic that we're going to discuss.
Yes, we are. Yes, we're glad you're here. Thank you. Good.
I'm Angela. I guess I am very sensitive to earthquake. I usually can tell earthquake coming 3 days ahead. But I was checking on Dutch Scene's website. He talks about that. I think yesterday from 1 p.m. For like hours there was a local earthquake in Southern California. And I'm predicting that there will be a very big earthquake and probably in San Francisco.
I've been reading that too.
Very soon, at any time. So we would also be affected.
Yes.
I guess he was talking about the Hayward coast of San Francisco. Every 250 years, something like that, they have a 9.0, and we are due now. So I think USGS was talking about that we're going to have a very big very soon.
But you say you also feel
It's
that 4.3 is.
For the last,
It's just funny. Like I love hearing people say that. I'm like, yes, they know.
Yeah. 6 months ago or 9 months ago. And on that day and the day before, I was feeling that I was like dizzy the whole day, really, really dizzy. And there was no reason to it. I had 8 hours or 7 hours of sleep. I had no reason for that. But then I knew that. And I told my friends. And then at night, around 7 or 8 o'clock, I need to.
Good, thank you. Thank you for coming today.
Angela, may I ask you a question?
Yeah,
What
sure.
day were you feeling dizzy?
No, usually it's like 3 days before the earthquake. But then I don't know where I work on a 14th floor of a high-rise building. And I don't know where the earthquake is. It coming to Southern California or in other part of the world. I felt that a few times before, but it was in Solomon Island or somewhere there in the Pacific. And then I felt in Central America, the one in
Okay, we're gonna move on, but thank you very much. Let's move on. Rochelle, where is she? Rochelle's busy. Let's go to Barbara. Barbara, any personal observations you had in the last month?
No, but I too have been reading a lot about a coming earthquake. And supposedly the Pacific Northwest had one, but it didn't affect me. And I haven't really had any personal effect in the last month of what's going on. But I think September 25th, 23rd to 25th is when something big is supposed to happen. I've been reading that a lot.
Okay, thank you. Paulette?
Hi, I just wanted to make an announcement because it's so important. On September the 12th, it's a Saturday. There's going to be a rally on geoengineering at the Sacramento, at the Capitol building in Sacramento. And Michael Murphy and some others are organizing it. And I received a call from Deborah Whitman, who speaks about these topics. And so she is asking if we want to have a table right there. So we will talk about it later, but just wanted to make an announcement. It's exciting.
Okay, thank you. Good, hello. Do you have something you want to share? What's your name?
Alice.
Hi, Alice. Okay, good. Hello, welcome back. Good. Anything to share?
Well, the ring of fire around the Pacific's been really active lately, even over the last few years, so we could well see some. And somebody up in Oregon, the one Lake, has been moving rather remarkably. And I've been hearing talk on the radio about how this may be an extremely significant movement that breaks loose up off the Oregon and Washington coast. So we may well be working at a big quake sometime soon. We had a really big one down South America. Of course, Japan when Fukushima happened. New Zealand, Christchurch got clobbered. So it does seem like there's a movement there. That just was excited by other people's conversations.
Good. Thank you. John, any comments?
Well, I have some shares. I've had brain fog, no drinking. I've had agitation. I've discovered a cell tower is very near my house. I had that WTF moment of how did I miss that? And I've experienced practically everything that each one of you has. I'm a fitness coach. And I'm extremely glad that Joseph is here today. I've never seen Joseph talk, but I'm sure just from looking at his handout, he's got fantastic stuff. Because what I want to share with you is, I'm 64 and I've worked out most all my life. I'm a strong dude. I'm healthy, hopefully, and I cannot support by myself taking what's coming out of the sky, what's coming through the water, what's coming through EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, and what's coming through, what are those GMOs, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So I'm starting to learn how I can get in better health with this assault. We can't stop it. Maybe we can. All right, I retract that. Maybe we can stop it. Maybe we will. But until we do, what Joseph has got to say and what I've got to say is basically your only defense against more problems. I would like not to have to say what I'm saying. I would pay dearly to be wrong. No one's come up to me yet with my big mouth and said, here's why you're wrong, and sit down, I'm going to give you the story. Okay. I sent an email today to my Los Angeles Skywatch friends, and since I don't have good memory, I'm going to have to read it, and I will make this as quickly as possible. Who's familiar with HR 1599? The Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act of 2015. Otherwise known as
The Dark Act.
The Dark Act. Deny Americans the right to know. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this as quickly as possible. So the Dark Act has passed the House. It has not yet been introduced in the Senate. I have absolute faith, and I believe they're waiting for our reactions to gauge what they're going to do in the Senate.
John, could you tell us what this is about?
Does anybody need more information on what the Dark Act is?
Yes.
HR 1599 has to do with requiring labeling on foods that they contain GMOs.
And any GMO derivative.
Anything having to do with GMOs, the HR 1599 is opposing having the necessity for that to be put on there by the manufacturer. The companies which profit from GMOs have spent tens of millions of dollars to say, let us volunteer to consider thinking about possibly approaching labeling. But while we go through that process, we want you to eat our food anyway and have a nice day.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, that's the bottom line, period. They want you to eat their food.
Yes.
We don't want to eat it,
Which
that's the war.
you bring me to my next point. And I'm going to try and make this as quickly as possible because Joseph's got a lot of good stuff to say. Okay, the House didn't hear us evidently because of the money mufflers that they're wearing right now. So keep asking yourself, as you figure out what kind of action you're going to take, ask yourself this. In a culture of advertising going back past all of our lifetimes, where new and improved has strained the limits of credibility and has been strained by companies wanting to make bigger profits by adding something better to their products and then telling us about it, in this culture, why have these companies spent tens of millions of dollars not to put the good news on their product labels? Now, this process of GMOs, this process is the best word I can come up with. I'm not a smart man. I'm sharp, but I'm not smart. This process that they've spent billions of dollars perfecting, this process that improves your food, this process that helps food protect itself by making its own pesticides, this miraculous and mysterious leap into the future, this process is what companies do not want you to know about. Basically, like you just said, shut up and eat your food. That's the bottom line. So, if anybody can give me a different viewpoint, I'm interested. Okay, so I come to the reason why I'm taking up your time and your valuable attention. I have printed out, and I will give to each one of you, contacts for the Senate and the House of Representatives. Unless you have this in your smartphone, unless you have it memorized, unless you've got it available on your laptop right now, you're not prepared. Because if you talk to somebody new, like in a way, some of you may be new in a way, and I don't give you this information, it goes from, wow, that's a great idea, to, oh, wow, the Goodyear blimp, look at that, and, oh, I've got to get home, and blah, blah, blah. It goes away. Plus, I know that I'm talking to people that are being assaulted just like me. Brain fog, agitation, and
Stomach stress, fibromyalgia, brain cancer,
you name it. He's got the list. I just can start. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Usually when you hand out papers, they get left behind by some folks. I'm personally telling each one of you, I don't want any of these papers left. You can take them home and throw them away, but I promise you, I will chase you out the door if you leave this thing on.
I'm gonna show this to people.
So, John, just an action plan. You want us to start calling these actually Monday?
Okay, now, I don't want anything yet, except just to get this in your hands. Because now I've done my job. Because we're all adults, and we all understand that the House of Representatives and the Senate are bought by a corporation. And I sent files to every one of our Los Angeles Skywatch people. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I suggest. My suggestion. HR 1599 is an important thing because it now has brought this to your attention that your House of Representatives, I want you to all look at me. I want you to all look very closely at me. The House of Representatives has said this to you personally. I want you to look at this. Right? You take this personally? You should, because your House of Representatives just said that to every one of you, and me too. They said, fuck you, whatever you want, we don't care, because we've got enough cash where we don't have to pay attention. And we can survive the media going, oh, it's terrible, they didn't pay attention, and they're off to the next thing. However, when the Senate comes up for this bill, that paper in your hands is going to help you to feel better about being an American. Participate in your government. Am I saying it'll work? No. But if you don't participate, I guarantee you it won't work. I guarantee you 100%.
How many Republicans in the Senate are going to vote for our side?
If I had that information, I'd give it to you.
Can you name any? 6 or 7, from what I've heard.
6 or 7?
Yeah, that are actually
we got
for sure.
Feinstein going for it.
Oh, hold on a second. The concept is participate in your government. I can't predict the outcome, but if you don't, if you sit there and be a wise intellectual and say, what the fuck, it doesn't matter if I do anything or not, I promise you, you'll get exactly what they want to give you.
Well, have you know I'm a wise intellectual.
I'm a bigger wise guy, so you're not gonna win on this stage. All right, so
It kind of ties in with what you just said. I signed a petition way back when the Dark Act started.
Yeah.
And yesterday, I got a personal email from Barbara Boxer,
Right.
who is a Democrat and
Right.
usually votes for the.
100% rating by the National Resource Defense Council. 100%.
No, she voted against the Dark Act, which is a first.
Yeah,
That's a first.
that's great.
She voted against it. So that ties in with what you just said.
Okay.
If we do something, there's a chance that if our voice is heard,
Yeah.
they will change their vote.
Well, we have Boxer on our side almost all things. I'm really sad to see her go, but Feinstein, there's no way it seems to dislodge her.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Black people had the Million Man March, right? Why don't we have like a 5 million person march to Washington?
Well, that would get stuff.
I know it's easier said than done. I understand the concept, but if I don't broach it, it's never going to get talked about. Food is more important and it's more understandable by the average person out on the street than, well, this is barium, strontium, and sometimes copper manganese. Sometimes they put fungus in there, sometimes they put blood in there. Don't you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, they don't get what you're saying, but they'll get when you're talking about food. Because we all have to eat it. Water, very difficult. It's clear, it looks good, not too bad. Fluoride, oh well, we'll deal with that another time. But food is very different. And this concept, this subject is hot in the media right now. If you want to gain traction with your friends for geoengineering, start with GMOs.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you come in with some credibility, you can actually say in simple terms what a plant that makes its own pesticides, a plant that has fish parts in it, or whatever, and I'll get better at that. If you can convince the average run-of-the-mill American that this is not in their best interests. And I want to make this one, I'm trying to pull this together, but I'm old. You know in the mafia movies, when they put the gun to the guy's head and say, "Hey, Louie, it's nothing personal, just business." This is what the corporations of America and the world have basically said to each one of you: it's nothing personal, it's just business. Now, to the guy that gets the bullet in the head, it's personal.
That's us.
Right? So I want you to just think in those terms. I'm very happy that you let me say this. I'm very happy that you let me talk, and
thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Just to tie what John says and what Paulette says, in the September 12th march in Sacramento, we're not just doing a geoengineering demonstration, it's connected with the GMOs.
Oh, good.
There's going to be both GMO and geoengineering at the same time.
Yes.
It's a rally.
And related.
And fracking, I think,
yes.
too. So they're trying to put we're doing a number of things, but I think to me it's still the most important.
Oh, and just one more thing, and this is very, very different, but it has to do with the links that I gave you. I just gave you a start on talking to your congressmen, talking to your senators, and you can either do it by phone or do it by email. Now, here's what I request of you. Each one of you has favorite video links that you've gone to over the past to get information about geoengineering. On that paper that I handed you is my email address and my phone number. If you would give me 2 of your best links, I will publish them through Los Angeles Skywatch. I don't know how, but I want your best links. Hey, go to see this guy. It's a 24-minute presentation. It's really great. If you don't want to send me anything, don't. But if you have links that you love, please send. I got 2 that I would recommend anybody having to do with world banking and other things. I would send people to immediately.
Money Masters?
All wars are bankers' wars.
Gotcha.
That's Michael Rivera's 45-minute program. Within 45 minutes, this New Yorker just puts you right into where the history's been going on since the late 1700s. He's good.
Good.
So please just take that paper, look at the email address. If you have 2 links that you would like to send me, if you have 5, you need to send 5, do it. But please give me your favorite links having to do with mostly geoengineering. But if you got another one that you think people should know about, please send it to me.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to introduce Joseph Montgomery. Joseph has traveled quite far to be with us today. He was out in the Marietta Hot Springs area.
Yep.
And believe me, that's a trek. Deal with the freeway traffic coming in. But this is the second time he visited us. He gave a talk back in April that was focusing on health. I think this will also have focus partly on health, but also a subject that's very dear to him. And I don't think it's so unrelated to chemtrails. I think we'll see a connection. But I really appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
And if you need any further help, let me know. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Joseph Montgomery. Bob, so wonderful for bringing me here today and giving me a second opportunity. And he is correct in bridging this mentality that we're trying to give to everybody, that we come in as this group focused on maybe one particular topic, but we all kind of see the bigger picture in this as well, too. My last presentation was on aerosol toxicity, and it did cover a very broad spectrum, and we didn't mention this one particular topic. But after we passed the 4-year mark, it was interesting for me with the anniversary of March 11th on Fukushima that we really have lost all ability to know anything as to what's occurring, what's happening, where are we at today. And I know that the idea is it's not the big burning, topic on everybody's news system, even though even in its own country, they don't talk very much about this whole issue. And it's in their backyard. So when we get watered down material, we're even more ill-informed. So you have to really strive to understand this process and what's been going on here. And that's why looking at this 4 years later, I think there's a lot of people who, even when I say it, they go, oh yeah, that thing that happened and it's done? Oh, okay. And they just brush it to the side. And I really like the idea of coming in, giving this presentation, because now we're actually in the stage in the game where it's affecting us directly. And that's the problem. I think that this is one of those. I want people to imagine, visualize, and keep this with you after this presentation. The idea is that technically the country of Japan, ill-wittingly and through natural issues, after the earthquake which caused the tsunami, which caused the breakdown to actually start the reactor explosion process that's occurred in 4 out of the 5, it was really a slow-timed aerial and water-based nuclear device that was actually launched. They had a really big to-do about it when it occurred because it was hot topic, big earthquake, crazy issues, watching the tsunami flood videos, and now 4 years later it's finally landing here, and no one really knows why or what happened whenever it started.
You say finally landing, but you mean the radioactivity?
It's actually being delivered here by the ocean system. We did get a large percentage in the atmosphere, right within about 6.5 hours, believe it or not. That's how quick the actual, some of the fine particulates were able to come through here. But the interesting part is this is contributing to a lot of what we shared as we started today, that everyone is just now feeling this final beginning breakdown of what's going to happen in the next 15, 20, 50, really about 45,000 years on this coastline. So just keep that with you today. The idea was we saw the launch. It was a very big explosion. We saw it all occur. Everybody put it on news. You probably watched it. And because it's taken so long for it to have a direct effect, we've let it kind of go out of our big picture. And I definitely want to just give this great opportunity of putting things forward for everybody. So as we go through, we'll try to keep as much of the conversation and questions to the end, and that way we can actually go through things very quickly and succinctly, because there might be the same questions for individuals. But so let's just make sure that we can kind of run through this and go through the whole presentation. As we saw the actual events occur, the idea is that we didn't really get to see too much because there was only 2 videos that were able to actually be produced from different sort of cameras that are placed above the nuclear reactor, and one that was actually a news image camera to where it was being captured real time as we saw some of the fires and some of the issues that occurred afterwards. There were 3 explosions that day, not one, not a tiny little issue to where it was just a structure fire and then it went away, but there was 3 actual nuclear reaction explosions. So already, when people do, one of the biggest things that's an injustice to this issue is they say, oh, same as Chernobyl, we're fine, that was in the 80s, who cares? When they push this to the side, they're forgetting this one main difference. The reactor in that 80s scenario is actually pretty similar to what occurred here. But the difference is that they were able to dome it, contain it, and actually allow for it not to be a continuous issue. So one of the big problems we're dealing with today is the fact of this hasn't stopped. So it's been 4 years running full blast. All of the 3 reactors that were initially damaged and exploded that day have been releasing their material. The cleanup effort has been compounding the problem. The company in charge is actually the people who had the issue occur in the first place. No one has come to actually create any sort of solution systems, and us as a whole in this world have not been a large enough voice in order to actually make a true stab at a change. It's unique because, to me, at the point where you go 1 year past the date of this occurring and there's really no solution happening, someone should have stepped in. There are other people who need to be a part of this process. The group of people who own this company, who actually run the plant, are still struggling today with trying to figure out a solution that they didn't have 4 years ago. And they have not brought in enough experts. They have not brought enough people in. And the people who have put themselves out to design material, they've actually sort of pushed to the side as well, too. So this is a very, very different scenario, and that's one of those misinformation pieces I want for people to actually just kind of, it's not Chernobyl. It will never be Chernobyl. It is literally thousands of times stronger and worse than Chernobyl.
What is the cleanup effort so far, man?
None.
What are they doing?
Zero.
Nothing at all.
All they're doing is dumping water on top. That's the only thing they can do.
And that flows into the sea.
Of course, every single day.
Totally destroying the Pacific Ocean.
Exactly. So the funny thing here is that there were, they do every so often, about 3 times a week, they'll take a barge or two of zeolite powder taken away from the Tonga reef systems. So crushed zeolite, which is actually a pretty good radiation reducer, and you can use it for your own personal health and protection. But they're only putting a few of those out, and what they're trying to do really is take the majority of the high radionuclei in the very area of the plant and drop it to the seafloor to let it sit there, so that way when they're testing the water, they don't get as big of a result and they don't show that there's actually any issue occurring. So that's about the only thing they really can do. Understand that the buildings where this occurred, and you're seeing again reactor 4, reactor 3, reactor 2, reactor 1, all of these are actually completely done, burnt through. 4, 3, and 2 have actually gone through their containment shells and are actually dropped into the crust of the earth and are melting a hole of radioactive deposits right below their actual housing systems.
Was 3 the only one to contain cesium? Or?
No, of course not. No, all 3 of these, and of course their spent fuel pools were actually contained inside the buildings, and the waste rods that are contained to the back of the building, you can see a few of the actual storage depots that are in these areas here. Those actually are all still filled with radioactive material that is outside air exposed during all of this issue. Walking into this building, you actually would get 100 certs per day. Per hour is the way that they're actually sitting at. The average human person can take about 20 to 30 millicerts per hour. That's in your life. That's in that one whole year. So the unique thing is that there is no one who can walk in here, fix this. Radio surveying and robotic technology is actually not able to even penetrate a lot of the main inner holes in order to see even what's going on. And that's where this big issue is occurring. Right now, they're only dropping water on top of it. That's all they can figure out.
So we're containing it like Chernobyl.
There's no possibility.
Why not?
Because the actual Chernobyl incident was different. Again, we had a breakdown in the actual rod firing system that actually stopped the cooling of one section of rods. And they actually were able to keep the housing surrounding it. There's no housing left on any of these reactors. There's nothing to contain, and now the main issue, like I say, is that this material burns at about 3,000 to 5,000 degrees Celsius, and therefore melted the actual surface of the earth below it, and are now lost into the ground, and there is no ability for containment. So, of course, they are still dropping, going further and further down into the actual ocean, and that means, of course, they're in contact with the ocean sea level water on a daily basis, plus they're still flushing the top. So we're having a tremendous issue. And it's unique because this cleanup material really is contaminant itself, and we don't have a way of either purifying and protecting what's actually, and they're reusing the water multiple times over until eventually they say, oh, it's leaking anyways, let's just dump it, and it's just flowing right back down into the ocean. So, as you can see here, this is one of the interesting issues that when you can pull information out of the country of Japan and all of the technology that we are able to use, you can see that there's divided here 3 sections, 3 areas of issues that we're dealing with. Anything within the actual purple zone here, this whole portion of this prefecture is actually a no entry zone. People are not allowed to rehabitate. They've been moved away and are not allowed to actually come back in. Workers are kept to a very low minimum exposure rate. They can't stay in here for longer than about a week or so before they are considered contaminant. There is the group that's known as Fukushima 50. They are the 50 individuals who said, whether this kills me or not, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to try to figure this out. And one of the actual lead member did die last year. So it is interesting that they come out of it with the reports, though, that say that his cancer was so aggressive that it was impossible for it to actually be caused by the beginnings of this event. And therefore, let's not keep any sort of scenarios that it was actually this reactor and the explosions and his exposure while he was there on site that could have exacerbated his extremely aggressive lung and heart cancer. Very, very interesting way of putting things. So as we go through, again, we talked about the cesium issue. The reason cesium, I think, is actually so routinely talked about is because it's a really easy one to identify to just the Fukushima reactors. And so that's one of the signature pieces, but it's unique because it also gets blown out of the water in terms of the conversations that have been held on what's the true cause for a lot of the detriment and damage to individuals. Cesium is pretty damaging. It does affect a lot of our stomach tissues, a lot of our liver tissues and lung tissues. And again, it's one of those where we definitely need to watch what it's doing to us. But the much more damaging particulates are iodine 131, which again, a single grain of it actually lodged into your thyroid will shut that entire organ down. For anybody who's not aware of what their thyroid does for them, it literally is the central circuit box, breaker system for the entire human body. Yes.
So, in World War II, the reason the Japanese survived so well was because they eat so much seaweed.
Correct.
And their thyroids are constantly full of iodine.
Correct.
So, is that something that would work to protect ourselves against the iodine? And if I get World War II as well,
yeah.
Is the iodine not have a much shorter half-life than seaweed?
Well,
could you repeat the question?
So let's get there. So the idea is that during the actual bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, their survival rate was actually pretty high for a lot of the Japanese inhabitants, which we kind of attest to the idea that they have a very high iodine-rich diet, eating so much kombu and a lot of the different seaweeds that are located in the general area. And the unique part about this situation is that would be the case had the bombs not been dropped into the ocean. Then their seaweed eating would not have actually helped them at all. And that's where we're stuck today, is that the ability for the actual ocean to protect us is lost in this case and scenario because it's now fully contaminated and has only the ability to continue to poison you. So we are in an interesting situation that, yes, iodine is very critical in the protection of keeping your thyroid healthy, but please do not continue to actually take iodine in from seaweed sources, because most of it comes from, believe it or not, just south of this actual power plant. So there's an issue there.
She was talking. You say do not consume any
Do
seaweed.
not.
No seaweed.
Do not. If you're going down to Chile, Argentina, if you're in the southern hemisphere, there's a much better protection zone, but they also don't grow very tasty seaweed, so it's kind of funny. But a lot of the material, again, that we've been able to be exposed to is found and harvested in the seas just outside of Japan. So not a good idea. Radioactive iodine, again, to kind of go a little further on what you were saying, is something where, yes, the half-life is shorter than, say, strontium or plutonium, uranium. Yes?
The local co-op, after this happened, stopped carrying seaweed. And
Good.
They decided again that it was safe.
Who?
Co-op. Local 16th and Broadway.
I'm not from here. I don't know what they are. But yeah, no,
You don't buy that.
not at all.
What did they say?
Not at all. The interesting thing is, of course, understand that 5 days after this event occurred in 2011, all of the actual standard FDA, EPA, and National Health Institute organization numbers for what you can consume in terms of radiation all jumped either 10 to 20, 30 fold. So the idea was this event occurred, they knew we were going to get more radiation, so every limitation actually went up higher. And the unique thing now is that a lot of the food products, of course, for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that's actually not able to be sold in Japan, China, most of this area, have been now shipped to the United States because our levels are so much higher. Thank you to the EPA. So it's unique because it's one of those, don't trust really anybody if you can help it. As you're going through and understanding, though, that half-life just means that half of the actual particulates have been removed. It does not mean the lethality of those have been reduced by half. It's not that the fire is half as cold or half as hot, or that something that's actually causing damage to your body is reduced in any way, shape, or form. And again, half-life really just means to say, like with the cesium reaction, half-life is about 4 years. So half of the multiple billions of tons of cesium that have been released are gone. They've been reduced down to subsurface or subparticulate radionuclide. They're still just as damaging in terms of being ionizing radiation. That doesn't mean anything when it comes to the fact that this is man-made radiation, and all of our standards that we actually use to govern this are used for natural occurring radiation. That's coming out of radon, like for granite countertops. that's coming out of tritium that's actually found naturally in water as it connects with ozone, and things of that nature. Not material that's been enriched inside an actual nuclear reactor and then used for fuel in order to produce one of these plants. So we're really trying to understand that the area here has already been deemed so hazardous to human health that you can't live here. And yet, for some reason, the seaweed that comes directly on the outside area here in the water is perfectly fine for you to eat. So there's a big issue there.
And we're getting cesium and radioactive iodine from such seaweed?
Correct. And strontium and all the other people that come away from that.
And it's being sold here in the States?
Yes.
You're saying anything, any Pacific seaweed?
Any Pacific thing at all, really. But seaweed especially.
And you're saying one molecule of radioactive iodine
is enough to be damaging to the thyroid and all the tissue surrounding it. Yes,
I'm going to say this because Joseph said this at the beginning. He's got a lot to present to us. I would ask only if you could slow down a little bit because some of it is technical.
Can you review it? Could you make a conclusion?
Well, we will. But would you please, if you have a question, just jot it down.
Yeah, we'll try.
There'll be time, and we're going to have questions and answers. But please hold it. Let him finish out his whole presentation. Thank you.
And again, this is heavy. This is one of those where if you honestly thought you're going to come here and enjoy the lunch and the afternoon, this is tough. It's hard to even really think about how things are working. So there have been strategies that have actually come out since this event has occurred. One of those is actually a 19-year-old in, I believe his country of origin is Italy, designed a system that was actually a subsurface skimmer that would be able to go through and neutralize a majority of the actual radiation material that it would come in contact with. It's not been adopted. So $58 million, they probably could start solving the problem. Instead of, we found out recently that the fine for this was about $7.5 billion, and the cleanup effort will be forever from this point forward. It's unique because that's one of those major issues when it comes to how much it costs to solve problems like this. There is no long-term solution. There was an idea that we could actually dig very large moats surrounding the actual reactors before they went below the surface, and we could fill that full of activated charcoal, zeolite, and find some way of capping and containing. But right now, that's again been thrown out for at least 3 of the reactors. So that's
thrown out.
Correct. They're not even able to be connected. They don't even know where they are anymore. So it's unique because this is the way that they're treating the actual situation over there. Over here, we're having a ton of problems. So it's unique because we're not directly behind it, and it's not in our backyard. We don't see it. It's technically invisible. It doesn't smell. It doesn't have a problem. But we're finding the evidence of it throughout multiple areas that we're being able to be exposed to. So when we understand this problem, it's a big one for anybody who's living here today. The models that they actually are using in order to come up with some sort of idea as to what's happening, the main problem that there is occurring is what they call single point emissions. The idea is they've actually had all of their modeling occur as if it was only that one day was the only release that ever actually happened. Same thing, like I say, about the concept of the explosion at Chernobyl, that it was contained afterwards and there's no problem. That's not what's occurring. This is every single second, every single day, every single year going by, material that's just being leaked into the environment and to the issue. So this model that you see here shows the initial bulb of the main hot activity radiation material as it comes away. And again, if you notice, we live right there. So this was actually something that showed occurrence within 6 months was probably the initial effects to the West Coast here. So we know that there's a breakdown occurring with this, this type of idea, because they're saying that the modeling here is actually showing a decrease in concentration coming away from the reactors and being flown put into the oceans, and that's not true.
I didn't quite understand. You said something about because they contain the charcoal, the 3 reactors have disappeared or gone.
Correct. Right. The reactors have melted down and gone into the crust of the Earth.
Okay.
So they are hot enough to melt rock, and especially the near beach sands, to be able to actually dissipate them and liquefy the ground. And technically, they're making their own tunnels.
Making your own what?
I believe he's talking about a 65-ton pieces of equipment that has gone through the earth. That's how big one of those things is. And there's 3 of them.
65.
So that gives you a
Correct.
frame of reference.
And again, the unique thing about most of these reactors, including the small victory we had for temporary shutdown for San Onofre, is that they a lot of times store the waste rods that aren't actively being used in the process inside the reactor. So a lot of times these are double and triple stuffed in terms of just house rods that are actually taken and put into storage container boxes. So when this reaction occurred, it was exploding more than just the active rods, but actually using the rest of the fuel that was being stored inside the tanks. So it's unique because then we start seeing, like I say, the effects. And it's a problematic situation here, just like a lot of what we talk about when it comes to the chemtrail issues, GMO issues, a lot of our other current topics, is that how can you prove that there's technically one of these actually creating what we're saying is going on here in terms of the radioactive damage to the environment? But we have just a ton, and I mean, it's just amazing to me, the body of material where mass cross-broad species die-offs. We're seeing everything from starfish to fiddler crabs, all the way down to the salmon, to a lot of the nearshore mussels. All of the invertebrates are actually exposed to a lot of this material. We're finding that, again, we get the initial idea that there's some sort of virus or bacterium or some disease affecting them, which is fine. We'll talk about that in a second. It's unique, though, because then we get into the higher order biomagnified animals that essentially go up to the sea lions, the dolphins, and these material, and even terrestrial species like bald eagles, elk, bear, polar bear, that are eating those particular items and having their own issues, to where this is one of those main struggles that we're dealing with. The after effects, though, if you're a person or an animal that's being affected, can have all of the major symptoms of what we see of radiation exposure: fur loss, skin deterioration, tumor growth, internal organ damage. But the unique thing is we're actually now seeing the long-term effects take a bigger hold, and that is all of the small species dying off to the point to where there's just no food to actually feed anything that needs to eat something else. The plankton is finally hitting the main issue here on our west coast, and once that system drops down, every animal above that in that chain dies off as well too. So that's where we're getting, again, one of those that you cannot say for this particular year especially that we've had an extreme amount of the base of the food chain dying off as to why that's occurring, except for water toxicity to the point to where you're actually getting radioactive nuclei finally touching our coastlines, and the evidence is showing up in a lot of these great articles. And again, it's one of these struggles that I go back and forth with on individuals when we talk about the effects of material. This is the aerosol. So this is the aerosol modeling. This is what happened from the actual explosion. There was a mushroom cloud that was lifted away from the actual Fukushima plant that started traveling through the air. So when we want to talk about things that affect us as human beings, when it comes to breathing, when it comes to eating, one of the unique aspects that I always tell individuals is that everything in the atmosphere really never goes away. It just kind of gets recycled. So when we're experiencing the jet stream here, this is, literally, it happened on March 11th. This is March 22nd. The entire west coast of the United States is completely immersed in radionuclide that have been discovered, found, and actually registered with what you were mentioning there about having an actual device on the outside of your patio there to notice that this is occurring. This means it's going on your salad. This means it's going into your milk. It means it's getting transported to all the reservoirs, all the streams, and there's nothing stopping it. This material is technically being deposited on every bit of life, on every rainstorm that we go through out of the atmosphere, coming right back down on people who are living in the northern hemisphere. So there is some truth to the idea that you're going to feel progressively worse. You're going to get a little more radiation each time you eat, each time you drink, each time you bathe. You're going to get more just each time you breathe. So it's a huge concern when we talk about, like I say, the breakdown. This is actually a picture of a rock outcrop in British Columbia. that's on the west coast here. This was taken 2 years ago. And this particular area would normally be coated by about 50 to 60 different types of seaweed. There would be anywhere between 100 to 200 different types of crustaceans and vertebrates. There would be material from everything you see here in terms of starfish. You would have different types of bird populations. All of these material would be housed and found in these particular areas. Luckily, there is a gentleman who's had 14 years experience monitoring and doing the biological assessments for the area in British Columbia that this is pictures taken from. They are now down to 1 species of starfish, 2 types of mussel, and a few different types of snail that have survived. There's 1 type of bull kelp, and everything else is dead. So the effects of what we're seeing long term are here to be the way that this will all happen.
I'm going to stop here for a moment.
Yeah.
If you turn on the light, we've had Joseph come as a guest. And what we're hearing today is something I think will help all of us. Can we turn on the light, please? We are a donation-based group. Actually, whether we had, I forgot to mention, we had a tabling last weekend over in the valley at a hotel. We had a lot of response, but we had flyers, DVDs to give away, communicate the information to the public. We're going to be doing more tabling, but we need also your help, donation-wise. So we're going to hand out a box. Be 1 or 2 boxes?
1 box.
All right. Would you please hand it out? Start here and please donate whatever you can. And we'll just take about 5 minutes for this.
Joseph, is that just 1 mushroom cloud?
There technically were 3 explosions.
For each reactor?
But the instantaneous reaction between number 4 and number 3 would give it almost 1 signature cloud. And then there was a 3rd that popped 4 days later, finally.
Should we be seeing some debilitation of our thyroid here in California?
Oh, of course.
And how's that showing up in the populace?
Well, the sad part about it really is that we already had such a thyroid epidemic in this country that it's not going to be really known for about 10 to 15 years.
Why are we having a thyroid epidemic?
Generally just having a very low serum iodine level in our population, having most of it coming from the actual overtoxicity of chlorine and bromine from tap water and those sources, push out your natural ability to absorb iodine back into the body. So the thyroid, hypothyroidism, and Hashimoto's disease is the epidemic that we're a lot of times seeing. We're up to about 30 to 40 million individuals experiencing at least some damage or some issue in their thyroid gland. And the unique thing is that there's really not going to be any main solution when we start to see more absorption of this. Thyroid cancer is already on the rise, and there's going to be a lot of studies probably done that show that it's not outside of the norm for this to be something where we see it increase in the next couple of years. And it'll take 20 years before someone finally does a report that's big enough that'll actually show, oh, wait a minute, this occurred on this date, and then 5 years later it was this rate, 10 years later it was this rate, 20 years later it was this rate.
Question, what about the perchlorate, rocket fuel, and mill and water and all kinds of stuff that's destroying fire everywhere?
Oh, of course. Anything that's like that, fertilizers, DDT, all of the old Agent Orange. I mean, it's still in our water. It's still there. It's still damaging. And again, that creates a lot of thyroid or hormone dysfunction. The difference with radionuclide is that it actually creates the erosion or the detriment and the necrotic nature of the tissue. So it's literally eating it away in terms of a heating potential and burning the actual outsides. So this is a very interesting thing. Hold on 1 second.
About water osmosis reverse.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work?
Not for radiation.
After Chernobyl, how many Americans are thought to have died from Chernobyl?
It's funny. They actually only put the number. What do you believe? So they actually put it at a grand total for the entire country and everything from the fallout at somewhere about 250 to 300,000.
In the U.S.?
The U.S. no. The U.S. only probably saw about 400 or 500, but that's again one of those where they didn't even have radionuclide detectors where they could trace particular issues when someone died of cancer or some sort of issue that they could have said, oh, this is directly correlated. So we had no soldiers, no population, no scientists who went over there to become direct exposed. The official number count only says 8 individuals died in the entire incident, and 2 of those were because of construction accidents after they were working in the area.
The Chernobyl Museum in Kiev goes into it in quite detail about who died in the ensuing month. So
there's a lot of
it's a matter of hundreds there in around Chernobyl.
Oh,
and
correct.
it's literally a dead zone.
Correct.
I mean, people are sneaking back in there like the Fukushima or whatever. But it is really isolated. It's the pure fed marshes, which are a really important ecological zone to that area. But no, I mean, you look at their museum in Kiev, and it's extensive about, they know these people died, and lots of children.
It's very interesting though, because if you look at the IAIC, they list it as 8.
Yeah, but where do they get the 250,000? Was that supposed to be across Russia somehow?
That's across Russia. And that's people who actually came in with very specific styles of different types of genomic issues, very interesting mutations that occurred. Again, the birth population there, it's not like the Americas where every birth is registered. So the unique thing is you wouldn't know if somebody had a very interesting mutation in their fetus and there was a stillbirth, and it just wouldn't have been counted. So they still say upwards in like 200,000 to 300,000 were in the months afterwards, the years afterwards. And it is interesting because they have, again, said it's a dead zone. They're building a brand new dome, actually right now, sarcophagus over the top, because it still isn't done. And Chernobyl's actually eating through the concrete that they put over top of it to try to fix it the first time. And that's where you can see how persistent of a problem this is. And like I say, we're dealing with 4 reactors at this particular location instead of just the 1.
Okay, I think we're ready to continue. Thank you for your donations.